we should talk about fats. I know that we have come across fats back and forth as we've been talking about food in general. We've touched especially on the hydrogenated fats when we talked about shopping in the middle of the store where all of those ugly ingredients tend to be on the shelves. And so today what I wanted to do is kind of be a little bit more specific and clear about what kinds of fats there are, what are their health benefits or their health deterrents, where do we find them, in what foods, and how much of them should we be taking in, depending on what it is our goals are in terms of health and fitness and body weight maintenance and that type of thing. One thing that we know is that most foods, unless they are a fruit or a vegetable, and even some fruits, actually no, fruits don't. If it's, for example, what do you think of an avocado? Is it a fruit or a vegetable?
It's supposed to be a fruit.
You would think, but it's actually a nut. So therefore, it's really fat, right? So there you have like a kind of a, the terms are ambiguous, but most foods have some sort of combination of ingredients, especially fats. Foods that have fats in them are not always exclusively saturated or exclusively poly or monounsaturated. There's usually some combination of those things that happens. The thing that you do need to know is that even if it's a good, quote, good fat, like olive oil or something like that, it still has exactly the same number of calories per serving as a spoonful of lard or bacon grease or Crisco. They all have the same number of calories. Had a really interesting class the other day with a group of seniors. They wanted to know about margarine. So I went to the H-E-B and I looked on the shelves for all the different types of margarine that I could find that did not have hydrogenated oils, and we're going to talk about those in detail. I found 3, and then I brought a regular old little tin of butter. And we started looking at the labels on them during class. And what we came to find out is that the margarines, except for one, all had 1 to 2 grams more fat per serving than the butter, right? Interesting. They all had really similar amounts of saturated fat, although they also had combinations of polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. But the butter was 100% saturated fat, but it had the same number of calories or a little bit less, usually about 20 calories less per serving than those other margarines. And so they were very, very interested in this. They're, because they're really calorie conscious. Anyway, that the best choice would obviously be portion-controlled real food, as opposed to these margarines that were a list of ingredients about this long, most of which you can't pronounce. There's lots of additives to make them solid, even if it's not hydrogenation. They're just full of chemicals. These are folks whose doctors have been telling them for 25 years, don't eat butter. And they were some of them really reluctant to even taste it, because we did a taste test. Didn't even want to taste it. No, I don't eat that. Even though I was trying to tell them that it's not any more unhealthy for you than some of these other things with all this added ingredients. So interesting kind of dichotomy that goes on there, because we have in our minds, ooh, saturated fat, butter's bad, butter's bad. But in terms of caloric intake, there's not a whole lot of difference, and it's real food. Your body knows exactly what to do with that fat. So in the context of fats in general, there are 5 different types. There's polyunsaturated, which we know are heart healthy. They come from vegetable oils. We've talked a lot about that. Margarine, some margarines, they put them in there. Cold water fish, seeds, and most nuts have the polyunsaturated. So cold water fish, anybody have an idea what that might be? Salmon, wild salmon. All of these things are coming from cold water, which means that they are not raised on a farm. The water at farms is not cold. Why is it important that the water be cold? Cold water is the reason why these fish have fat. It keeps them warm, just like it does for us. But the thing is that when they live in warm water, typically it is farmed water. It's not natural temperature, which means that somebody's feeding them. And what they're feeding them is fish food, like the stuff you put in aquariums. It's processed food that makes them grow, and they get fat, and they get all of this fat on their bodies. But because the food is dead, cooked food, there's no chlorophyll in it. It's not fresh food. It's not live food. The fat that they make is more saturated than polyunsaturated. In other words, it's not high in those omega-3s that we're all looking for, that are so good for us. So they need to be wild. They need to be wild so that they're out there eating plankton and algae and everything that's alive. That's when they make good fats. The monounsaturated, also in the cold water fish, also specifically in canola oil, flaxseed oil, and walnuts. Olive oil and canola oil have a mixture of poly and monounsaturated. The difference between these two, polyunsaturated, you can heat it a little bit more, and monounsaturated, you need to be really careful when you cook with it. You don't want it to get real hot. Both of those help reduce the bad blood cholesterol and your blood fats, which are triglycerides. So saturated, these are the ones we all know about dairy fat, whole milk, hard cheese, hard and soft cheese. They're all saturated. Sour creams, ice creams, cream, and all the fats that are on meats. Visible, any kind of visible fat, because if it's saturated, it's solid at room temperature, just like the fat on our body. This is saturated. It's solid. It's not liquid. So if you can see it, if it's white and hard, it's saturated. Tropical oils such as palm and coconut. So palm oil is one that you're going to find in lots of foods that are now saying no trans fats, no hydrogenated oils. They're substituting palm oil. Coconut oil, a little bit less. It's more expensive. It's got some really good health properties for a saturated oil. So if you're looking for something to cook at high temperatures, for example, if you're going to cook really low-fat hamburger meat, you know how it's really dry? Coconut oil would be a great fat to put in there to cook the meat so that there's a little bit more fat, a little juicier, and it's good for your heart. Cholesterol is something, it does exist in animal products, but the cholesterol in your bloodstream is not coming from the food that you eat. Can I say that again? Did you guys hear that? Because you're gonna go and tell your doctor, and your doctor's gonna be like, don't eat eggs. Don't eat meats with saturated fat. And you're going to say, yeah, but the nutritionist at our wellness program said that cholesterol doesn't come from the food that I eat. It doesn't. The cholesterol that they pull out of your blood comes from your liver. You make it. You make that stuff.
What makes you make that cholesterol?
There lies the secret. So cholesterol is this substance that we make that runs around in our body, and it has a function. Its function is to aid in repair, mostly. It also has hormonal properties. It's got a function. But the reason that they're saying watch how much cholesterol you put in your diet is because it's also what causes our arteries to get smaller as it sticks to the walls. But that's not because we're eating it. It's because we have inflammation. And the inside of our arteries is being damaged by inflammation that's in our bloodstream, right? So the cholesterol sent out by signal to come and patch that inflammatory spot. Once it's there and you have cholesterol in your bloodstream, it's sticky. So cholesterol that floats by can stick to it. But as an agent in your body, it doesn't really come from the food that you eat. Comes from processes such as high cortisol. Does anybody know what cortisol is? Cortisol is a hormone that we put out. It's called the fight or flight hormone. It's the stress hormone. High stress causes lots of cholesterol in your bloodstream, causes damage to the inside of your blood vessels. That calls for cortisol. Anyway, so that happens. What else? What else causes inflammation? Cigarette smoking, too much alcohol.
Salt,
Salt, not so much directly. It would be a more indirect response. Insulin Insulin causes inflammation when there's too much of it in your bloodstream. So if your doctor has told you, you know, you're like pre-diabetic or you got this thing called metabolic syndrome, you're going to have some inflammation. Your cholesterol levels are going to go up because it's trying to patch those inflammatory spots. So it's not so much about the actual cholesterol that you put in your mouth as your lifestyle and the rest of the things that can cause that. So stress relief is a big deal when it comes to cholesterol. So fats are essential nutrients. You cannot have a diet that doesn't have fat in it. You must have it. You cannot lose weight unless you eat fat. You have to have at least a certain amount of fat in your body. At least 20% of the calories that you take in every day should be fat, up to 30%, depending on what your diet consists of. The hydrogenated fat, remember we talked about it lives in the middle of the grocery store? Yep. They're called, you'll see them called trans fats, hydrogenated oils. They're made in a test tube, as you said yesterday. It's a chemical that's made in a lab or in a facility where they hook it up with hydrogen and make a liquid a solid. They don't go rancid very fast, so they're great for putting things on the shelves in the grocery stores. It lasts 6 months, 8 months. I mean, think of the Twinkie. It's got like a 2-year shelf life. I don't know, do they still have that shelf life? A lot of foods they're taking out hydrogenated oils because the public education program has been really effective. So there's a lot of organizations or food companies that are taking it out of their products. They're substituting palm oil. So we have to watch out for those palm oils as well. They've got some points here. I just put 3 or 4 points. Watch out for the stuff. It'll say partially or fully hydrogenated soybean, canola, cottonseed, any kind of oil. Look to see where it is on the ingredients. Can be in the top 4 ingredients. It's going to be a pretty significant amount. For me, if I see it at all, I put it away. I just put it back. But one thing that we've noticed about label reading is that you look at, they'll have, for example, what was I looking at today? It was like a little, I don't know, some kind of sticky bun or something. And I was reading the ingredients, and they had, the first ingredient was the flour, and then they had the frosting. And in the frosting, they had a list of like, I don't know, 14 or 15 ingredients in the frosting. And then the next ingredient was a hydrogenated oil, but it looked like it was way down the list, but it was the 3rd major ingredient in that product. It's just that they had a little insert with the topping, which had a bunch of different stuff. So you it's a trick. They can make up to half of the ingredient listings. The last one is fast food restaurants. And this actually, I started doing a little more research on this, and in the last year or so, many fast food restaurants have taken hydrogenated oils out of their food lines. It used to be like pretty much all fast food restaurants would get these huge blocks of like Crisco stuff. It comes in a box. Inside the box is a plastic bag, and you pull it out, and it's this big block of white stuff. And then you dump it in the fry vat, and they turn it on, and it slowly melts, and boom, French fries. Now what they're doing is they're putting actual liquid oil. They're not using that hydrogenated oil. More and more restaurants. McDonald's has taken it out of their French fries. Kentucky Fried Chicken is taking it out. So a lot of these restaurants realize that people are getting smart. They don't want to eat that stuff, so they're making the change. So if we demand it, if we educate folks, change can actually happen. So the more polyunsaturated an oil is, the less you want to use it for hot cooking. If you're going to do something with really hot oil, get a saturated fat like coconut, like, animal fat is a better way to cook than using a hydrogenated oil. Don't be afraid of fats. Remember that we're still working with a calories in, calories out equation. If you get up into the 30% range of fat calories, choose good ones and watch the amount of the other foods that you take in. But if you eat a good amount of fat in your diet, you're not going to be eating a bunch of sugars and carbohydrates and simple carbs. You just don't want them. You'll feel full.